I'm from Chile, originally, in South America. Mostly communication classes, anything and everything from business communication, intercultural communication, one of my favorites actually, speech, even public communication, some journalism classes too, here and there. Mostly communication stuff, and normally related to an intercultural, international twist. I've been at Western as a professor for over a year, almost exactly a year. I started last fall, 2007, so I guess almost a year. I was an exchange student though, here at Western from Chile, from my university in Chile, 10 years ago. So I guess I've been here twice. Ecuador, here in the States. I was a teaching assistant in Chile as well. And that's it, I guess those three countries. In Chile, we have both private and public education, just like in the States and most countries, I guess, at least in the Western world. It's a very interesting system. We have ownership. It can be privately owned. It can be fully public owned too. In my case, I've been in both in Chile. I went to private schools, fully private schools, and public schools, and there's something in between. It's called like a mix. It's sort of like a mix between public and private, in which a private school, which is privately owned, receives some money, some financial aid from the government, but also that demands certain requirements from the owner of these institutions, these educational institutions. Let's see. Something interesting at this respect is like in Chile, for instance, in terms of higher education, universities, the best universities in Chile, which is very different compared to the rest of Latin America anyway, and to the rest of the developing world, is that in Chile the best universities are still the public universities. And greatly so in terms of research, in terms of the PhDs and doctorates per institutions, the quality of the students, how hard it is to have access to the universities too. You need to go to, it's kind of like a Japanese style, and also in Europe they have that too. You need to take exams, certain tests, and then you go into university, and the public universities, they have higher standards than the private ones. It's a different system, slightly different. We have only what it's called in Chile basic education, which is the first eight grades, so 1 to 8. Then you go into what is called media education, which is the next 4 years, right? 12, just like here in the States. So high school would be only 4 years there, I guess. When it comes to high schools and elementary schools, and there is a difference. The actually best students in terms of being measured by these tests that allow you to go into higher education, by far they come from private, expensive schools. In terms of socioeconomic differences, certainly I would have to say that although my government has been working for the last 12 years, pretty much 15, 18 years really, trying to close this gap between private and public education, to trying to generate a better equal access, equal opportunity to all socioeconomic stratas, there is a difference, unfortunately. In terms of gender, no, because again, if you have the money and you have access to good private education, doesn't matter if you're female or male. In that sense, there's no discrimination in terms of access to good education due to gender. I don't remember the numbers. I happen to know that it's very high. One of the reasons is that there's a lot of offered, meaning there's a lot of private universities, and like I said before, you may not do really well in the national tests that they're required in order to get to higher education, but if you don't do it that well, if you don't do that well in those tests, you still have the opportunity to go to a not so good university if you want to. That's kind of like the free market offering, opportunities if you have the money to pay for it. Just like anywhere else in Chile, and again, even in Ecuador, I saw it too, and developing nations and developed nations as well. There is an economic factor that plays into the whole well, should I or should I not go? Could I or could I not go? Are you the first one going to college in your family? That makes a difference. And normally there is a relation between that and income. I'm not sure about the states in particular. I do know that that's the case anyway, but I don't know how intense or how important is that particular factor, your environmental situation, economic situation. In Chile, money is not necessarily the most important reason, but it's related to it because it still requires a certain amount of effort. If you don't have the money to pay for it, the government, kind of like what you guys do here, the government lends you money with no interest, so you have access to it. It's mandatory for every university to make available for students those funds, and depending on your income and socioeconomic situation, you have a certain amount. It can go anything from 95% full coverage of their tuition to 10%. But the thing is that covers also only your tuition. We do have some sort of dorms too for those who don't have the money to pay for it. But it is hard. You're competing against a certain amount of people, students who wants to go to university. So if you don't have the money to pay, although the state and even private institutions and scholarships may offer you the opportunity to do it, you are competing against some, so some don't get it. And on top of that, it makes it hard to complete it because you need to pay for 4 or 5 years of school. Plus, normally that means that you want to have to get a job on top of that. So now you have a job, you're studying, well, you know, it makes it harder. So there is technically, no, not technically, there is a sort of handicap if you don't have the economic resources to pay for education. The government in Chile is doing everything they can to try to reduce that. Indigenous people, native people don't pay. It's absolutely free for them if you can prove that you have, I think that is at least, I believe 1 or 2 grandparents. You can prove that one of them at least is native. You don't have to pay, which is very unheard of in Latin America. So they're trying to, again,